Thank you for joining us today. Could you tell us just a little bit about yourselves and maybe your unique connections to the immigrant and refugee experiences?
Hello, my name is Xiong. I am a student at Fresno State. My parents migrated from Laos to Thailand in the late 80s. They migrated to Thailand to escape the genocide in Laos because due to the Laos Civil War, what today we call the Civil War. And I was born in a Thailand refugee camp in 1989. And then my family was the last wave of refugees to come, Southeast Asian refugees to come to the United States in the middle of 1990s. So I came here in 94, I was 5 years old. And so we came here, and we have always lived in Fresno. And then 10 years later, we have the final wave of Southeast Asian refugees, the Hmong community that migrated to Fresno. So I was born a refugee, and I basically grew. I can remember a lot about living there, and then I came here in '94, and I never really see anything. I never really thought of it until I was much older.
Hello, thank you for sharing. So my name is Brenda Ordaz. I am an immigrant, so I'm going to talk about the immigrant journey or the immigrant experience. My family is originally from Mexico. That we are indigenous from an indigenous community from the state of Oaxaca in Mexico, and so my family migrated here from Mexico. But before that, we migrated between Mexico. So we would move to the neighboring state of Chiapas and Sinaloa, then Baja California, which is Lower California, following the crop season. My family, for many generations have been following that little trail, and then back to Oaxaca until my family decided to settle in Baja California, which is where I was born. And then from there, my father decided to migrate to the United States in the late 80s. And back then, he would migrate between the United States and Mexico regularly, maybe once a month. He would cross back and forth until things got harder at the border to cross. So then it would, go from 3 months. So he would come back every 3 months. And then as it got harder, he decided to just migrate the whole family over to the United States. So in 2003, my whole family made the journey to come to the U.S. and we left Mexico.
Great. So, all of that is just, it's so fascinating because I think that so many of us that are going to be, listening to this video later cannot even imagine making such a big life change pretty much overnight. Can you tell us a little bit about just maybe your experiences of the process that you guys went through of becoming American, not necessarily just the citizenship, the legal considerations, but also just the kind of the adjustment period. What sorts of experiences did you encounter? What sorts of circumstances did you encounter at that time? And do you feel as though gradually any of those circumstances or experiences have changed for you?
I came here when I was 5, so I didn't really see a lot of changes because I just thought that's the way people live. People move. They move from one house to another house, and we just got on the plane. I can't even remember getting on the plane, but I remember that when we came here to Fresno, and then I went to kindergarten, and then. But I wasn't I didn't really see differences. I didn't see how my experience. I now that thinking back, I was like, I didn't really feel as a 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like I had to adjust. I just thought that was normal. You move to a different place, you meet different people, and I met folks who looked different from me for the first time. But I didn't think much of it. You're a kid. How could you learn about race and culture and community, right? So adjusting, I think my parents might have a different experience because they came here much older, and they did. They had to migrate again, from Laos to Thailand and to the U.S. So they definitely will have a bigger problem with adjusting to the new environment. But I didn't really have to deal with that. I was way too young to really feel any different.
Mhm. So my transition wasn't as subtle. It was more very abrupt actually. And it's funny that you mentioned the word American because in Mexico we don't consider people from the U.S. American. We do consider them American, but we call them estadounidenses, which is the term, just like Mexicans are Mexicans because of the whole we all live in North America. So more becoming or transitioning into becoming more into the U.S. culture, it was challenging because, like I've mentioned before, my parents, my family actually came here undocumented. So we didn't take a plane, we didn't take a car, we actually had to walk the desert. So we walked for I was 10, 11 years old. So we walked 5 nights through the desert. So I knew that it was a big change, right? If it was that much walking. Then once we got here, it was very different because where I came from, it was a very rural town. We had maybe, I think that back then the census, and it wasn't a formal census, it was just our head count. There was about 300 people in our town, including children. And we had one tiny school with 2 rooms, and that's where, 3 classes on this side, 3 classes on that side, and that was school. So coming here and, seeing all the street lights, all the people, it was very, very not challenging, it was just very, it was very surprising, it was confusing, the language was completely different. And then in Baja California, where I lived, we get a lot of tourists, so we get a lot of American or gringos that people call them there, come down and then donate clothes and do stuff like that. But it was just, you get a little tiny bit of the view. But when you come here and you see like this country is full of people that speak English, it was very traumatic, I can say, for the beginning of the journey, that I was just like, nope, I'm not gonna do it here. I'm just go back to Mexico. But over the years, it got easier to not assimilate, but to integrate into the culture.
Yeah, thinking about like becoming American, right? I don't think that I heard of the word American as a word that identify person until I was in high school, when my peers were telling me that you can't be Hmong and American at the same time, right? Because we were talking about patriotism and how you fight for your country, and someone told me, well, if I'm American, that I can't be Hmong anymore. And it made me start thinking about how we use the word American in our community, because in the Hmong community we use a short word, Mika, which is short for American, but which is also synonymous with white people. So I didn't grow up with people telling me that, hey, you're an American now because you live here now. Right? Because I grew up in the Hmong ethnic conclave in Fresno, so I was always surrounded by Hmong people, and no one ever taught me about identity and being American, your cultural identity, and then your national identity. And I didn't learn that until I was in high school. So it was a really odd experience for me, because even at that age, when I learned the term American as a national identity, I was very accepting to it. I liked it, but just having that experience with my peers who are really resistant, because they didn't feel like it was okay for them to be American and Hmong at the same time. But because I learned what the word mean, it wasn't so hard for me. But at the same time, I could understand why, I never thought of it. I never thought that word as a national identity, because no one ever really taught me that was okay.
Mm-hmm. So I know that both of you guys work very closely with the Penn Valley Institute here in Fresno. And based on your observations during your work there, do you feel that matters are changing for new refugees and other aspiring new Americans?
For refugees?
No Americans, refugees. With one of our fellow was work closely with the Syrian community, the new Americans coming in, and my experience as a refugee, and then now, being introduced to this new community of refugee, I feel that we are, as a community, very accepting towards the new Americans. We are very helpful. My experience with the Syrian community is that, I saw that our community in Fresno were very helpful to them. We're welcoming this different group who were willing to give and to help out, ask for donation. And I don't know how they took it, but when I saw that, I was like, wow, I think we're becoming more accepting of Americans, and I didn't think like, and then connecting to my experience coming here again, I didn't see any difference. Like I was too young to really experience if people like me or not. But working with San and working with her community, I saw that we're very accepting, and despite the national conversation about it, locally here in Fresno, it was just my experience with Wasan. It's been very positive.
Yeah, I think I echo what she said, and also with immigrants, it's over the years we've established this kind of pattern of we have stores that are just all Hispanic Latinos that are from different countries. So people come to the U.S. or specifically to Central Valley, and they are able to find everything that they could find in their country back home. So I think that we definitely have made that impact, and we've created a path for new immigrants to feel less isolated than they did before.
So do you feel like most of the support for new immigrants and new refugees to this country is coming from those, I guess you would say, like ethnic communities that are already established here? Or do you is that where you're seeing most of the support coming from? Or do you feel like there's sufficient support from even outside of those communities?
I think, like, even when in 2004, when the last Hmong refugee camp closed, I feel like a lot of support came from the Hmong community that was already here. A lot of advocacy happened because the Hmong community here advocated for them and really supported them in transition into the American community. So I feel that the established community that is already from that group has been very helpful. Seeing that with the Muslim community, it's been very helpful that they have folks in the Muslim community here who can help them navigate the system. So I see, we definitely receive a lot of support. When my community came in the 70s, there was like no Hmong, very few Hmong people who are American or Western educated. So there's a lot of support from the churches. But now there are more support from just community members who have been here already.
Yeah, I echo what C. I mean, I think the most of the support that's coming is definitely from our own communities and from people that have been here for generations. So people that have been established here, that lived through the struggle and are trying to make a better path for the new immigrants. So.
And if you could ask anything from the community in terms of because I'm hearing a lot of that the communities that these immigrants identify with are helping them out, but is there something that maybe the community at large should be doing, in your opinion, or that you could see as an opportunity for other people to support the kinds of work that you do?
I think, I'll go for you. I think that with the current political climate that we have and the current narrative about immigrants and about refugees, about the criminalization of immigrants, about saying, these are bad hombres and bad mujeres, it's very important for the community to speak out, to speak up, to use the privilege that they have to, just as immigrants, just as people that are white people, or immigrants that are already, citizens, residents, or legal status, to speak up against the narrative and say, that's not true, that's not the community that, that's not who they are, right? So I think that more than anything, it's just that, changing the narrative and speaking up and really supporting the community.
I think that it's very important to have a conversation in my community about immigration today. And because we came here as refugees of a war that we believe that the U.S. wanted us here, that we were invited to come here because that's the way that the United States was making amends with our community. So with the recent ban, the conversation about the war, banning undocumented immigrants from Mexico, my experience shows that there's not a lot of empathy toward undocumented immigrants because we feel that we were invited to be here. We came here legally, so how dare other people come here illegally? And how dare they come here and they take it from us, right? So there's a lot of that sentiment, and I feel that it's important to have a conversation that the United States political, the United States policy and military policy have affected Mexico as much as affected Southeast Asia, and how that brought that wave of undocumented immigrants to the United States. So we should be more empathetic towards our undocumented immigrant neighbors and friends, and because we weren't as United States wasn't as inviting toward us in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of resistance and a lot of fear about the Chinese refugee being here as well.
And do you feel similarly? That there are similar circumstances within the Latino communities?
I'm sorry, similar to?
Oh, sorry. And do you feel that there's sort of a similar sentiment among among Latino communities in this country that they're somehow distinctly different than say incoming Syrian refugees or?
Oh, okay, yeah. So I definitely think that there is this not being able to understand, this different culture, what the process of refugees are, and the different status, right? So even I see myself and Wasan have had the discussion of, okay, so are we all not immigrants, or because some communities of refugees are very very strong on the point that they're not immigrants, that they're refugees, or vice versa. So making that distinction, I think it's somewhat difficult for people to say, okay, what is the difference between myself and these people? And again, I think C talks about how some people that are refugees feel like they were invited to come here, whereas immigrants, whether it's undocumented immigrants or legal immigrants, feel like they're coming here and they should be grateful for coming here, so there's that component to that. So I think there's, yeah.
Yeah, and I also think that native-born Americans have a lot to do with that conversation as well. Because in my experience, I've been told, like, you deserve to come here because your people helped the United States, right? So that potentially can make me think like, oh, I deserve to be here, but Brenda and her community doesn't. So I think that native-born Americans have a lot to contribute to that conversation, how they can influence the way we think about other immigrant and refugee community.
Well, thank you for sharing your insights and your experiences, and I wish we had more time because this conversation I've certainly been enthralled with and I'm very interested in, and hope to learn more from you guys in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.